Hi, I'm Marcey. I'm an alcoholic. I've been through this process as it's laid out in our big book with the help of a big book step study sponsor, meetings like this, a loving God, making my amends, and I practice the latter steps to the best of my willingness and ability each day. I'm grateful to be here today sober by the grace of God, and when someone asks me to speak, I'm always honored and privileged, and also means I'm a hell of a speaker. I'm just kidding. No, it means that I'm qualified to speak at a meeting like this, really. And speaking of qualifying, I'll briefly qualify. I'm going to throw a poem at you on fear that I made up in my head when I was an active alcoholic. Fear cannot exist in a place that breathes so openly, fervently seeing the eyes of innocence, watching, yielding, believing that whole time it was me believing in the truth. So I made that poem up drunk. However, I knew back then that fear was within me and that I had to find the truth. So my subconscious was definitely active while I was active. And, I started drinking as a teenager, as most of us have. And it was fun in the beginning. And I made friends that way. And through high school and through college, and it didn't really start becoming heavy until my early 20s. And I lived in Miami, and I loved to party, and I loved to dress up and go to clubs and act older than I was. I moved back here because I'm from here, Framingham, and I entered the real world, the working world, and I discovered the bar after work, and I loved it. Work all day, drink all night. Work all day, drink all night. And that was fun in the beginning. And then a few years into it, I was like, I didn't say I had a problem, but I felt it in my head, the hangovers, the misery, and I was full of fear and didn't know it. So that progressed, and for a good 15 years, it progressed, and it progressed more. And my behaviors were atrocious. And in the end, I was lonely, miserable, and full of fear. I really got into this program as a result of a second DUI, and it's been a good 6 years now since that DUI. And during those 6 years, I haven't been sober the full 6 years, but for almost 4 years I have. But it got me to get into these AA meetings. And I didn't like AA meetings in the beginning. I thought I was weak. It was a willpower problem, that I had failed in life. And it was an emotional roller coaster the first year, just trying to figure it all out, where I belonged and how I should act. And, I was depressed and very lonely. I had a lot of feelings going on. But I stuck with it. And I kept coming, and I kept talking to people, and I made a few friends, and I got a sponsor. And my sponsor happens to be a big book step study sponsor. And she came to me in a noon meeting, right, a regular meeting, open discussion meeting, and she gave me her number. And she said, give me a call. And once I started talking to her, she said, why don't you come to my type of meeting? And she said, sit right next to me, and I sat right next to her in the second row of this particular meeting in St. Edward's Church in Framingham, and I sat next to her for 1 year and just listened, because she explained to me that you can't speak at these type of meetings until you've done the work on yourself, you've made a few amends, and you're qualified. So at this point, I was willing to do anything, because when I first got sober, it lasted about 8 months, and being a waitress, I was serving the alcohol, looking out the alcohol, and about 8 months later, it looked good to me on New Year's Eve. I figured I looked better, I feel better, my mind cleared up. I can drink socially now, I can have a couple. And I may have had a couple in the beginning when I was trying to control my drinking. And I quickly went back to drinking like a pig, like I had before. And I didn't realize it's a disease, it's an illness, that this obsession, this phenomenon of craving happens in my head, as the doctor's opinion says. And I had to pick up this book and go through this work with the Big Book Step Study sponsor for me to really learn about my alcoholism and figure out what I had to do, and that I had a threefold disease: mental, spiritual, and physical. And I needed the spiritual part so that I could heal my soul and continue to live a spiritual life and go to God when things get rough, not go to the bottle. And this took practice, and this took learning. It didn't happen overnight, and I'm still not perfect, and I realize nobody's perfect. And that helps, knowing that I'm not perfect, and neither is anybody else, and that this is a work in process. I'm a work in progress. And then I just keep diligently practicing these principles every day. It's a one day at a time program, and I didn't know what that meant in the beginning, but now I certainly do. I only have the 24 hours ahead of me. I haven't had a drink today, and I plan not drinking today. I wake up, I meditate, I pray, I bring God into my life, I turn my will over, and now I'll get to the fear. As part of my morning meditation, I have this book that my dad gave me, Each Day a New Beginning. He passed away 2 Octobers ago at the age of 67. He died early, and I'll love him forever. He was in this program. He brought me to my first meeting. He gave me this book, and he died sober. So I read this every day, and it's geared towards women, but it can apply to men too. And today it had to do with fear. And it says, "I can stand what I know. It's what I don't know that frightens me." That's the little quote by Francis Newton. Then it goes on to say, "Fear of the unknown, often referred to as a free-floating anxiety, catches up to us on occasion, but it needn't. The program offers us strength whenever we need it, and faith diminishes all fear. It is said that fear cannot exist where there is faith. We have many days when we feel strong, in touch with our higher power, able to meet all situations. On those days, we are seldom conscious of how our faith is guiding us, but the hours of fear that we experience on other days make us aware of faith's absence. There is a simple solution. We can reach out to a friend, we can be attentive to her needs, and the connection to God will be made. Shifting our focus from self-centered fears to another person's needs offers us a perspective on our own life. It also offers us a chance to let God work through us. Our own faith is strengthened each time we offer our services to God and to a friend in need. What may frighten us seems less important the closer we are to the people in our lives." And then it says, "When I touch someone else, God touches me in return." How convenient. This was my today's reading when I'm sharing on fear. So I thought I'd share it with you. I usually don't read, out of books to people, but this was important today. And I also brought my fear notebook. And see, when I did my 4th step, after I had made those important conclusions of the mind, step 1 and 2, and took the first action step, which is step 3, inviting God into my life or my higher power. You can choose any. That's what's wonderful about this program. You can choose any higher power you wish. It's not a religious program. It's a spiritual program. It's someone you decide to turn your will and your life over to every day that that will keep you sober, that you firmly believe that. And when I use that power, it works, and it gives me 24 hours. And each 24-hour period has gotten me, July 22nd will be 4 years. And it's gone pretty quick. And the first year went quick. And I said, I'll never get there. But I'm getting there, and I'm doing it. And I'm doing it with my higher power. And so this is my fear notebook. And when I did my 4th step, so we did resentments last week. And we talked about resentments of people, places, things, institutions. And this would be the second part, to write a fear list. So I got done with all that first part of the work, and my sponsor says, okay, it's time to do your fears. And she said, go ahead and write down all your fears. And see, I had a little cheat sheet because during your resentments, when you're writing all those people, you're supposed to write on the side of the column what it affected. Such as, in mine was a reoccurring thing. It affected my pride, my ambition, my self-esteem, and it affected my fear. And then she said, you're going to write down fear on all of them. No matter what you chose on this list, you're always going to put fear. Because fear, it affects fear on everything. And I didn't understand that in the beginning. See, I just listened, I was a good student, and I just did what she said. Because I wanted to do this. I'd seen what she's a very spiritual woman, she helps hundreds of women, and I see the miracles that this work does on people. So I had faith that this might work on me. So I went ahead and wrote down fear on everything. Fear, 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 fear. Not even knowing really what it meant. And then I got to the fears. And my point is that I had already, on my resentments, wrote down that the type of fears that really affected me were fear of not being good enough. I'm not worthwhile, of others' opinions, of confrontation. Now, all these are things that I was given a list of these things. So the first, the first at least 20 things I had already had a list of. So that gave me a good start. And they did apply to me, so I wrote down all those. Then I kept going, and I kept going, and I kept going. And I had about 92, almost 100. I have 92 fears. And I thought I was afraid of nothing, especially when I was drinking. I had liquid courage. After a few drinks, forget it, I could conquer the world, I could save it, I could fight, and I wasn't a fighter, I was mouthy, I would fight like that with my mouth, and I'm not afraid of you, and I'd take on people 7 feet tall, and I went dive bars and hung with and I'm not a biker person, don't get me wrong, I like Harley Davidsons, but I got the rough and tough bikers next to me, and I would take them on too. And this is all liquid courage, And then you take the drink out of you. I should just speak for myself. I took the drink out of myself, and I was left with all these fears. And this taught me, this process, what actually I was afraid of. And I'll just list a few examples. I'll randomly pick. So it happens I go right to, I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. So you list these fears, this is how it works, and you answer 3 questions. And this goes fairly quick, Once you get past the first part, the fear part, now you're on the roll. You're almost done. So I'm afraid that I'm not good enough, and I have to answer 3 questions. The first question is, why do I have this fear? The second is, when did I first have this fear? And the third is, how would this be different if I trusted and relied on God? So I began with this process. So again, I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. So I answer the first question. Why do I have this fear? I have this fear because of my present social status, the pains that I've experienced, and my present job. I'm still working on finding myself. I just turned 42. I was out there for 22 years partying. I didn't grow mentally. I didn't do all the things I wanted to do. I didn't finish college. I didn't, start this career and keep going with it. So I'm a little lost still. But I'm doing the best I can, and I know the things I need to do to progress in life and get a better job, find my purpose and usefulness in this life. It's all part of growing up. What I'm doing is growing up. So at least I pinpointed it. That's why I have this fear. Second was, when did I first have this fear? So I first had this fear when my parents got divorced when I was 5. I could trace it back to then, of not being good enough. And then 3, how would this be different if I trusted and relied on God? So if I trusted and relied on God, it would be different, because I would know that my spiritual being is more important than having a status quota, having a label on myself. So that's just one. I'll just flip. I was going to say, no, not that one, but I'll just be honest. All right. Okay, so here's a fear of getting fat. All right, so 1, I answered the question, why do I have this fear? I won't be attractive to me and to my boyfriend. And then 2, when did I first have this fear? When I began to gain weight and I stopped drinking recently at 37, because I'm small, I'm petite, I always have been little bones, that's just how I was born. But when I stopped drinking, I went to the donuts and the sweets and the candy and everything else, and I gained weight. And, when a little person gains weight, they look like a frog. They got a big belly. And I noticed that roll, I said, oh, I don't like this. I do, I'm sorry, I have a fear of it. So I wrote it down. And then, but that's when I first started feeling it. And then it says, how would this be different if I trusted and relied on God? So as long as I'm healthy, people will love me, even if I'm a little overweight. The inside is more important, So, and it's an inside job. You hear that around here about this work. You have to look within, do this work, answer the questions. I went with the flow. I followed my sponsor's guidance, and I healed. And I heal every day, and every day is not perfect. A couple days ago, I was isolating. I was in my head. I had, it's like I had the dark side in me. I was fearful. I was fearful, and I was back in my self-pity, and what am I going to do, and what's my life going to bring me, and, this and that and that. And it didn't bring me to drink, because now I have coping skills, and because of this work, I haven't had to have a drink or be obsessed by it. See, I'm not consumed with the feelings anymore. I can have the fear, I can walk through it, I can answer these questions in my head, and then I can get over it. I can get over it in a couple days. Now, if I'm consumed by it, and it goes weeks and months, and goes the whole year, maybe I need to get further assistance and further help. But with me, it seems that when I do have a fear, it'll last a day. It may only last the morning. But the key is to say there is a fear prayer, and it's very simple. And I wrote it on my notebook. I was instructed to write the third step prayer up here and the fear prayer on the bottom, because this is my fear notebook. I had a bunch of different notebooks because I went through my first resentment notebooks real fat. This one's my fear. So I got this notebook, and I wrote that, and it says, God, I'll pick an example of a fear. How about of fear of being alone? So I'll say, God, please remove my fear of being alone and direct my attention to what you would have me be. When I say it and mean it, it works. If I say it and just say it to say it, because people memorize things, facts, prayers, and if I just rattle off something I memorized, it doesn't work for me. But if I really, really mean it, get on my knees, and I don't always get on my knees, but saying it out loud really helps too. And my sponsor says when you pray, when you don't say things out loud, that the force will be with you, it knows. I like to say things out loud when I really am feeling down and upset. Like today I prayed out loud and I meant it. The past few days I've been just saying the third step prayer and just saying it out of memorization. And I didn't mean it, and I didn't feel it. And it didn't work. Now, it kept me away from a drink because, I'm going up 4 years sober. I've done this work, and I'm free from the bondage of self. And that's huge. I'm going to worry about myself still. I have to take care of myself. I've got a whole new world in front of me. And if I don't take care of myself, no one's going to. Now, I've got a few good buds that will. But for the most part, my mom raised me that if you don't do anything for yourself, no one else is going to. And then when I did start working on myself and doing this work, the promises started coming true. Miracles came in my life. I gained my self-respect back. I'm able to hold my head high and tell the truth and not lie, and not make up stupid little lies just to make myself feel better or because I feel bad about myself. It's amazing. I put down the drink, I did this work, and I healed. I healed from within. I had to face my demons, which includes facing all your fears. And fears are powerful. They can paralyze you. And they still sometimes paralyze me. But I work through it. Like I said, I'm not consumed by the fear. I talked to my sponsor about it. I talked to my boyfriend's also in the program. So we're like 10th step buddies. You know, if something comes up, although he says, you should communicate with me more, I wish you would. Sometimes I hold it in for a couple days. That does neither of us any good, holding things in. So I encourage you, if you do have a fear, to talk to somebody you trust about it, or write it down, answer the questions, say the fear prayer, and just keep working on yourself. Because it's made all the difference in my life. AA saved my life. This process, the Big Book Step Study process, saved my soul. So I'll be forever grateful for my sponsor and many people that have helped me in this program. Thank you very much.